Okay, the webinar is now live, and we've got some participants. Okay, let's get started. Hello, my name's Tina Bhartwas, and I'm the chair of the East of England Young Fabians Regional Group. And today we're really excited about our first event. This is our launch event on engaging women in local politics. And we have a fantastic panel with us here today. But before we get onto the panel, I'm just going to allow Nikki, who is the Young Fabians Executive Women's Officer, to say a few words about what she plans to do with the group and to just introduce herself.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hi, so just to introduce myself, my name is Nikki. I'm the newly elected Women's Officer for the Young Fabians, and I just want to say that I'm really looking forward to this event. I'm, really I've said to Tina a few times that I'm really delighted that the need for more women to stand in local politics, and I think it's quite timely as well that a lot of parts of the country will be having local elections next year. So some of the things that I'm hoping to do is to liaise with the networks across the Young Fabians and with the regional groups as well, including the East of England, to essentially come up with ways that we as an organisation can look to improve and increase the number of women who are actively involved. So that's whether they're on the podcast or writing for the Antics magazine or writing for the blog, or whether it's hosting events like these or getting them to run for positions within the networks or the regional groups or on the main exec as well. That's what I'm hoping to do, and I'm really looking forward to working with Tina and the rest of the exec on how we can continue the great work that they're doing in raising these kind of things and even to improve it as well. I think we can all agree that there's definitely a lacking of women across the country in local politics, whether that's as councillors or as council leaders, and that when there is gender equality, it improves the lives of everybody in the area. So, just wanted to make those points and say that I'm really looking forward to having some really good conversation. And back to you, Tina.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your work and for offering to introduce yourself here today. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce the panel in the order that they'll be speaking. First up is Shabina Qayyum. She is a councillor in Peterborough on Peterborough City Council and also a key worker. We've also got with us today leader of Stevenage Borough Council, Sharon Taylor, and the Co-op Party's local government officer, Emma Hoddinott. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Tina. Hello, everyone.
Okay. So the opening statements will just be a bit about your background, why you got into politics and what your role as a councillor is like, and just a bit about what you do outside of politics and why other women should get involved.
Okay. I think I was on the list, wasn't I? So hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation at your first launch event. And it's a pleasure to be able to share some of my experiences. I'm a councillor for East Ward here in Peterborough. I was first elected in 2019. I'm also the Shadow Cabinet Member for Investment and Commercial Interest. And I also sit on the Health Scrutiny Committee. And with my experience in safeguarding, because I'm also a GP, I use that a lot in bringing about different decision-making processes. And if anybody asked me why I became a councillor, it was because I was facing a lot more in the way of social-related problems with regards to housing, education, people having mental health problems associated with young mental health, such as bullying. The coronavirus is quite prevalent at the moment and quite high up in regards to numbers of patients that we are seeing suffering from a mental health problem. And my role as a counsellor, I felt, extended a bit with my GP role. And with my GP role, it was really difficult to try and facilitate things like housing for people that were on the housing register, or to be able to give a perspective on what their medical problems were like if they suffered from any comorbidities. Being a female, especially of BAME origin, it gives me the advantage of being able to speak in various languages. I've been able to put out messages of health promotion advice, such as smoking cessation, on the City Council, and also recently been putting out social distancing guidance in Urdu for Peterborough City Council as well. So that's just been useful, having that and being able to speak to people in their language, especially women who otherwise from ethnic minority backgrounds aren't as visible as we would like them to be. So having those conversations with women where they'd feel comfortable talking to a woman as compared to a man has been really quite instrumental. And it gets those women out. It sort of gives us a perspective as to what their viewpoints are and what they'd like to see in their communities and their societies that we represent as well. So there's the comfort factor with that. And I think that we definitely, like we were talking before the presentation had started, that there is a need for more women in general all over, but to also give hope to those young ethnic minority female members that there is always scope to come on board, and I'd definitely encourage them to do so. And that's what we're here for and hoping to achieve through this talk. Outside my role, I'm a GP of an 11,000 patient practice that's in the heart of the city, which is probably one of the most diverse populations and has also been unfortunately identified as a hotspot for COVID-19 infection rates. I'm also a member of the British Islamic Medical Association, and I give talks on a frequent basis to various communities, whether that's in mosque settings, religious settings, community centres. And I also host a health community show on a community radio station called Salam Radio. So those are just a few of the little hats that I wear outside my role. And my practice has recently been nominated for an Innovation Award in the United Kingdom for its services to primary care because of the joint working that we're doing with another practice. So some really exciting times for primary care at the moment. And it's a pleasure to be here and to give a little bit of my expertise within this area too as a counsellor. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Sharon, you're next.
Thank you, Tina. So I'm Sharon Taylor. I'm the leader at Stevenage Borough Council. Stevenage is a Labour council. We've got 28 out of the 39 seats, the Labour there. I've been leader now for 14 years. I was the first ever woman leader of Stevenage Council, and I've been a councillor for 24 years. I'm also a county councillor in Hertfordshire, where it certainly isn't Labour. We have 77 councillors in Hertfordshire and only 8 of us are Labour. So I do see things from both sides. I see the opposition side and the administration side of council life, which is always interesting. I also do a number of things at national level. So I'm on the I deliberately chose when I became a councillor to focus on finance, although I'm not an accountant, and I think it's, you know, it's probably better that I'm not. So I focused on finance. So I've always been involved with local government finance, and I now am a member of the Resources Board of the Local Government Association, and I'm the lead for finance on the District Councils Network. And I also chair the Cooperative Councils Network, and the cooperative part of my political life is really, really important to me, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Before I became a councillor, and I do that full time now, and there were good reasons for that when I started being leader. I worked in policing, and I ran the Chief Constable's office in Hertfordshire for about 13 years, which was a really fascinating, really busy job, and it was a real wrench to go away from that and go into my political life full time. But I did both together for about 18 months and thought I'll probably kill myself if I carry on doing both jobs. So when I became leader of the council, after about 18 months, I gave up my full-time job and did took on this council life as full-time. And I really care passionately about it. I'm passionate about my place. I still live in my hometown, and it's Britain's first new town. It's a place with an incredible community spirit, and we've certainly seen plenty of that over the last few months. And I'm passionate about people. The motto of my town is "The heart of a town lies in its people," which I think is the best town motto I've ever heard, but it's absolutely right for Stevenage. And I am very proud to often be able to represent my town. And we are currently undertaking some major regeneration projects. I've got £1 billion regeneration project underway, which is very exciting to do. So, you know, shaping the place where you've been born and grown up is the greatest privilege in my life. So I'm really proud of that. But, you know, our record with women in local government is really shocking. It's only about 35% of councillors are women. And on about 12% of councils, women are outnumbered by men by 3 to 1, which is a shocking record. And 96% of councils are male dominated. Only 7%, that's 20, of councils have a maternity policy in place, which is awful. Stevenage is one of them, I'm proud to say. And so there is a difference in the party political allocation of this. The Tories have about 30% women councillors, Liberal Democrats 34%, Labour 45%, and I think our selection processes have helped that. And I was against them to start with, so I'm not now, but I was in the first place. And Independents, about 29% of them are women, and just 20% of Labour council leaders are women still. And there's about 14.6% overall women council leaders in the country. That's 1 in 7. We have no Labour women elected as mayors of our core cities, which is terrible, but I'm very pleased that Tracy Brabin's now been selected to stand as a Labour mayor, which is fantastic news. And I don't know if you want me to go and talk about action yet, Tina, but there is lots of things we can do to help with all of this. I'll come on to that later if you'd rather I did that. On Stevenage, I'm very proud to say we've got 51% women councillors and 50% of our cabinet are women. So I'm really pleased with that. And as I say, if you want me to talk about some of the action you can take, I can either do that now or later, yeah, whichever you prefer. Shall I go on and do it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So in national terms, I think there are real positives that we can do to change this. And I think actually the very first thing we need to do is change the tone of politics. I think it's really off-putting for women. And I know because every time I turn my phone on, I will have been bombarded. I use social media a lot. It's a valuable tool, but it's also a place where you get beaten up very regularly. And it's virtual beating up, but it can be very difficult to deal with, depending on how strong you're feeling on that particular day. So I think we have to change the tone of all this. It can be really awful. And I have to tell you, there is still a very strong misogynist streak going on social media and elsewhere. And, you know, you do have to take some real, you have to be really resilient and have a thick skin. And I don't think that should be necessary. And when you look at the conduct, not so much at the moment in the House of Commons, because there's hardly any of them there, but generally speaking in the House of Commons, the conduct is appalling and very, very off-putting. And it can be in some council chambers, I know that. It's not in mine particularly, but I think that's probably to do with having 51% women on the council. I think we do need to change the tone of politics. The way we talk to each other, the way we respect each other's views is really important. We need positive action in selections. And as I say, I wasn't always an advocate for all women shortlists, but I certainly am now. Somebody, I think it's probably Harriet Harman, spoke to me and said to me, we might not need it forever, but we do need it at the moment or we will never turn things around. I accepted that. And I do think we do need positive action in selections. We need to support people with funding for child and adult carer responsibilities, give support to carers so that they are able to participate in civic life. one of the great, there have been a few little silver linings in this COVID crisis, and one of them is our use of technology. I know it's a mixed blessing, and when you've been sitting on Zoom since 8 o'clock this morning, as I have today, you can think it's a bit of a mixed blessing. But, you know, technology really helps people to participate who would not be able to participate if they had to go out to attend meetings. And I think we all need to, you know, not throw out the baby with the bathwater. When we get back to holding meetings in person again, we need to include that technology in our thinking. We need codes of conduct that take sexism seriously. I think it's really important that if people feel they are being treated in a way that is related to their gender, then they ought to be able to make a complaint about that and have it taken seriously. Over a third of female councillors have experienced incidents of sexism, which is terrible. And we need targets on councils for increasing representation. That's both for the councils and for the political parties that are represented on them. I think the gender balanced leadership in cabinet and committee posts is really important. So I have half of my cabinet are women, and 2 out of my 3 scrutiny chairs are women. My chair of audit is a woman, and my chair of licensing is a woman. And we mustn't have girl jobs and boy jobs. My finance portfolio holder is a woman and a disabled woman. My housing portfolio holder is a woman, and my community safety portfolio holder is a woman. And I think, you know, for all of us in local government, it's really important to not feel that you're being pushed into, you know, one of the jobs that might be more traditionally viewed as a girl job. I hate the term, but you know, it's too easy for people to think that's what you're going to do. And I always remember when I was doing a training session for new councillors once, and this young woman who'd only recently been elected, and I was talking about the fact that I'd volunteered to do the finance portfolio fairly early on in my councillor life. And I said, you know, very often women who are highly qualified to do something will not put themselves forward for one of those jobs, whereas a man who has a £10 note in his wallet will take on the finance portfolio because he thinks that gives him an entitlement to do it. I'm not anti-men, you know, I've got fantastic male colleagues, but that is the case. And she said, do you know what, I've got an accounting qualification. I'd never thought about using it in my councillor life. So, you know, we all have to think about what our skills are. And some very brilliant colleagues of mine, Judith Blake from Leeds, was talking about planning, highways and infrastructure, and saying, you know, when women are looking at those subjects, we think about the different interactions that go on. It's not an engineering exercise of how you build something or how it slots together. It's about how people interact with planning and infrastructure. That's not exclusively for women, but I think we're pretty good at it. And so when you're placemaking, it's not an engineering solution you're looking at how people interact with buildings and place. And another very good woman colleague, Claire Kober, said that women tend to have more interactions with public services than men do. So if we're looking at finance and we're having to make cuts, we know how that will impact on people and families, perhaps in a more deep-seated way than our male colleagues. There are things that have happened over the time I've been a councillor that really have not helped with this. And scrapping of council pensions, if we want to bring in young women to be councillors, it nearly always has some sort of impact on their career, and they shouldn't have to feel that it has an impact on their pension and everything as well. So I do think we've got to think about those things as well. And I was on a call with the fantastic Angela Rayner the other day, and she said to me, what difference do you think it makes that you've got such a good balance of women on your council and your cabinet? And I thought about that afterwards, and I think some of the services we deliver have been very much informed by that high percentage of women. We run something which we call a play service, but it's not really a play service. It's actually somewhere where children go during the holidays. They wouldn't have anywhere to go if they didn't go there. We look after them. We actually, they're not supposed to be fed at lunchtime, but they often are because their parents are working. And it's an amazing service. And it's those officers that operate that service that have been out there delivering the free school meals programme in the school holidays that we had to do because the government wouldn't. and they do all sorts of things, and they're going to be out. They were out today delivering activity packs to young people. Our domestic abuse service, an amazing, incredible service in Stevenage. That's run by, it's co-produced with the survivors and victims of domestic abuse. There are all sorts of elements to it, which I can go into in more detail if people want me to, but the one I'm particularly proud of at the moment, we've had a 90% increase in domestic abuse during the COVID crisis. And we've had to increase, we have a provision called Safe Space, which means if you walk out of your home because of abuse, you can walk into one of our safe spaces and everything will be there for you and up to 4 children. And we can fit a couple more in if we have to. Everything will be there, food vouchers, clothes, bedding, everything you need to survive in a warm, comfortable home. And you can stay there for 2 weeks or more while you decide what your next steps are going to be. We had 2 of those at the start of the COVID crisis. We've now got 19. So that's been a fantastic success for us. Housing, we've got a fantastic Housing First programme where we get people in to get them with a roof over their head. We've done this with our rough sleepers as well during COVID. And then we deal with all the issues that have made them homeless in the first place, whether that's mental health, drug and alcohol dependency. It may be just lack of resilience or an incapability to manage finances. And we help with all of that once we've got a roof over their head, and having that roof makes such a difference. Health and older people, we just had our housing older people strategy in front of the executive. The executive member that looks after that is a carer herself. She has a very severely disabled husband, and she, she'll often have to leave our meetings to attend to her caring needs. So she properly understands the needs of older people and carers. And in our business and economic development work, I love to make sure that our partners in that are encouraging young women entrepreneurs, and we've had literally dozens of them in Stevenage, and we've now set up a special project on our indoor market, excuse me, to encourage people to come in. So there are loads of things you can do on the council. Outside the council, I'd encourage people to set up women's forums, get women in, get them talking, get them listening to speakers, having discussions about politics. We, on our women's forum, we have Bring a Sister a couple of times a year. So we encourage people to bring along women friends. There's the Ask Her to Stand initiative, where we are all encouraged to go out and find one woman, whether it's a community leader, a friend, somebody you know from work who you think would be really good at this. Ask them to stand to, ask them to come and join us. Mentoring and buddying. So once you've got somebody who you think is either selected or they want to be a candidate, help them, be alongside them, help them to join in with all the networks that we've got, and identify those community leaders. We've got a fantastic new candidate who should have stood in May, but the elections were cancelled, and so she'll be standing next May. That's Myla Arcino, who is a fantastic community leader in our Filipino community. She works at the hospital, she does cardiac rehab, and she's just a brilliant community leader. And I think, there is so much we can all do to encourage, network and support our sisters to take part in community life, in civic life, sorry. And, those leaders are out there in the community. They just need that encouragement and that support and that inspiration to come and join us. So I hope that the Fabians will help us take part in this. I'm delighted to take part in your launch event, Tina. Thank you so much for asking me. And the cooperative side of my life is, co-production of services that women use with women is so important. I'm going to leave that a bit because I'm sure Emma will talk more about that. But, community and resident-led services, transferring community assets to the women and sisters that use them, using community wealth building programs to help women have more of a stake in the economy, and delivering services like adult care as cooperative services, so they are better for both the users of the service and the people who deliver them. All great cooperative projects, and I'll leave Emma to talk more about that, but thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to take part today, and Shabina, what an inspiration you are. It's lovely to hear from you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. That leads on really nicely to Emma.
Thank you very much, Tina. And it's hard to follow two amazing women who've shared their experiences. I'm Emma Hoddinott. I'm a councillor here in Rotherham. I'm also a cabinet member as well for waste, roads and community safety as well. So I do the bins and the highways. But I'm also the local government officer for the Co-op Party, and that's what I'm going to focus on over the next few minutes. If you don't know what the Co-op Party is, we're the sister party of the Labour Party. We've got an electoral agreement going back 97 years that allows us to stand joint candidates. And I think this is really important if we're looking at encouraging people to stand for election, because it provides a route into our politics. It provides a route for cooperators, people working in their community, to get more involved and have that political voice. During COVID-19, we've seen lots of cooperators and co-op councillors taking real practical action in their community. They're the people that are delivering the food parcels, looking after their neighbours, organising their community. And they've really taken us back to our roots, stepping in where there's been a lack of government support, really. We've been the first line of defence, helping our communities. And I think when you get involved in that practical action, when you get involved in that community action, you start to ask the questions about why. And I think that leads us very nicely into actually the why comes down to politics. And actually, if you want to change it, you need to get involved. And I think it's a really important thing that Sharon said about getting involved. I think all of us as councillors have that obligation to ask people to stand, ask them to get involved, and introduce them to the politics of their actions. I wanted to share with you, I guess, some of my experiences as the local government officer. I think it's right, it's still a very male-dominated world. About 40% of our co-op councillors are women, but it's still not half. We need to get to that point. But we do, but Labour and the Co-op Party do perform better than some of the other political parties. But today, actually, I had a secret Santa, and I was very happy with my secret Santa at work, because it was the development of local government, and it was by one Sydney and Beatrice Webb. And it looks at local government in the 16 to 1800s. And it was, and it makes you realise how long this struggle has been, because they do write about the issues that the councils there faced back then. And there's reference to a council in 1635 that was full of ancient inhabitants who were all men, and the problem of not having councils that represented the people that they're there to represent, that gap between those who are elected and those that are represented. And I think it's really important that our councillors do reflect the communities that they represent. And Tina will know, because I think she's been in one of my training sessions. We do a lot as the Co-op Party to encourage people to stand. And one of my training exercises is to get people to think about their USP, what's unique about them. And I pair them up, and they'll often start with, well, there's nothing, I don't do anything, I'm not, I don't do anything special. I haven't got what's needed to be a councillor. And then we go around the room and we hear the most amazing experiences and jobs and volunteer work that people do, and actually we've got to really value that. Everybody has something different to offer on the council. And I think once we start to appreciate that, it brings in more diverse candidates, and that's really important, because nobody stands as a councillor completely ready and prepared for it. I'm 8 years in and I'm still learning all the time. There's no such thing as being ready. You've got to go for it. And I think next year in particular, we've got a bumper set of elections in places like the East of England. We've got district, we've got county, we've got town and parish councils as well. if you are thinking of standing, now is your opportunity. We are going to need lots of candidates, but also there's a lot of us standing. There's a group to join. So at the Co-op Party, just to let people know, and I imagine you'll have similar within the Fabians, we do have a Co-op candidate development programme. We provide training for people who are thinking about standing, but also support them as candidates as well. We also have our sort of recently relaunched diversity networks as well within the Co-op Party around youth, women, BAME members can also have those support networks as well, and we'll be developing that work next year as well. So I guess my final thing to say is go for it. The support is out there, and for us that are already there, make sure you ask somebody good, you know, somebody you know, everybody has something to bring to this. Ask them to consider standing next year.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Emma. I think now's a good time to mention that the Fabian Women's Network does a number of training programs all around the year to help support people to stand. And I think this is a really good time to plug the Co-op Party's Youth Summer School, which is where I met Emma. And that was the first time I received some training. And I know that you've got the fantastic candidate development program at the moment, which I'm also on. So yeah, lots of opportunities to get involved. I have a couple of questions for our panelists before we go on to a Q&A, but I just wanted to remind people that you can send questions in, including anonymously, in the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. The first question I wanted to ask was in relation to what Shabina said right at the beginning, but to all three of you, how can we reach out and improve the representation of young BAME women on our councils? Because I know that that's something that's lacking, you know, right the way across for all of us. Do you want to start, Shabina?
Yeah, thank you, Tina. And first of all, I'd just like to say how inspirational the talks given by Emma and Sharon are, and what Sharon in her role as lead of Stevenage Council has achieved. And it's so heartwarming, especially all that work around domestic violence. And you've given me a lot of food for thought as to how to aspire to such goals. So thank you very much. Now, when we're talking about representation of BAME women, I think it's very important to take on board what Sharon has said about resilience and thick skin. Let's face it, women do not get it easy. And my own experience has not been an easy one. And it's on the basis of that experience that I'm actually, next full council, going to be putting in a motion that hopefully will get passed on the abuse of women in politics, and how we need to have legislation and policy within the council as a go-to for women who are experiencing abuse, both within the political fold and outside the political fold. Where do they get support from? What are the steps that need to be taken for them to receive that reassurance that something's going to be done about it? Often there are investigatory procedures in place, and obviously, as you know, that a new code of conduct has come out from the LGA for members, which is a little bit more stringent and actually is very more welcome. But when we talk about BAME women in particular, it's very important to realise that there is an element of patriarchy that exists within BAME politics in general, and it's seen throughout the UK. And one of those ways to address it is to have encouraging BAME males within your fold, which I was very fortunate to have. So I had seniors who were more experienced colleagues within the Labour fold who encouraged me, who were BAME, encouraged me to stand for council. And that's half the battle won, when you know that you have BAME male colleagues who are just as eager to have female BAME colleagues to stand shoulder to shoulder with them, and so that they are given those opportunities and fostered those opportunities as well, and who can really tap in to your expertise and the qualities that you have to bring about social justice and change within the chamber. So I think that that's the first thing that we need to take a look at. How encouraging are our BAME male colleagues to take on board BAME female women to stand for the role of council and to stand in elections? And I think that our processes of selection need to be reflective of that as well. So like Sharon was saying, the AWS has already brought in an improvement in the number of women that are now elected. I think that the AWS, for me, I stood in a ward that was AWS, and I'm glad to say that we're 3 councillors in that ward and 2 of us are female. Sam, who's a HC at the hospital and a great colleague of mine, we work very well with each other. But it's frightening because the normalisation of abuse that, there's a European Human Rights Commission report that has come out that shows that women in particular are subject to abuse in politics, and of that percentage, a higher proportion of BAME women face a lot more abuse than non-BAME. And it's frightening and off-putting for those BAME women that do aspire to come in to politics. Also, I think it's important to recognise that politics can be considered as a profession in its own right, and the vast amount of change that you can bring about to your communities through coming into this role. So it's very important to change the narrative about politics in the first place by starting off at grassroots levels. And I went to a local secondary school yesterday, and I was talking to some year 13s there, and I was very open about the fact and honest about the fact that it had been a very difficult journey for me in politics. I had an opponent that was also BAME, but it almost seemed to me, and I've got to be really honest with my emotions here, it almost seemed to me as if my dignity and self-respect were under his ownership, because there were a lot of judgmental views that were coming across, and some that I really did not negotiate would happen to me. So we really do need to start by, I think I would say I need to start by making the change myself. Had I walked away from all of this, then people like myself wouldn't have much of a hope in coming into this arena. And I stuck around because I refused to acknowledge that anybody would dictate when I would come and when I would leave. And once you can get the basic gist and focus that what you're achieving or trying to achieve is for the greater good, and that you are here for a completely different purpose, and that nobody has ownership over that aspect, then it's up to people like myself to encourage other women who are of BAME origin to come on board as well. So Sharon spoke about some of those programs as well, in which to find one person in the community. And I think responsibility starts from within. We often say that a tribe of women is powerful, and it's about me as a BAME woman taking upon myself that responsibility to find that tribe of like-minded women, and to demonstrate to them that it's not me alone and it's not about me, it's about all of us. And once we can get the narrative right, I think we'll be able to make progress.
Thank you for that. I think the way I would summarize that is just inspirational. I mean, as a young BAME woman looking to get into politics, and I'm up for election in May as well, there are a number of barriers, both in terms of, you know, first getting involved, but then also there are things that come up during the campaign. And I think it's about supporting those colleagues who are, you know, maybe suffering racist abuse on the doorstep, or having difficulties with male colleagues. I think that's really important. Thank you.
Set the precedent, never give up. You will set the precedent, and it is then up to you to build upon that. Never leave because somebody's dictation is for you to leave. You dictate where you are supposed to be, not anybody else.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Emma next.
Thank you very much. And I think, thank you, Shabina, for sharing your experiences. I can't pretend to know what it's like for a BAME woman standing for office or being a councillor, but what I can do is listen to their experiences and support and be an ally. I have listened to the story of one of our councillors, Councillor Ruth Shah. She's now the deputy leader of Oldham Council and absolutely deserves to be there. She is a fantastic councillor, and she's heading up their COVID-19 response, but she has spoken very publicly about what she calls the misogyny that she's faced from her own Asian community in particular, and some of the abuse that she's experienced. I can't imagine what that's like. I think it is something that BAME young women unfortunately do experience, but what I can do is to help challenge that, be an ally and support her and other BAME young women to come through.
And also the cooperative party as well, with their BAME council is something that I found really useful to go along to, and they're doing, the last I went, they were doing a number of things on COVID and the disproportionate impact on ethnic minorities. So yeah.
Yes, I think those member networks are really important for people to be able to come together and share their experiences and support each other as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm coming to Sharon next.
Thank you. And before I speak on that important question, I've just got my Secret Santa here, which I hope you can see. I thought this was just brilliant. Can you see it? It's a, I'm just going to move her little poster over. It's a, oh, I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? That way, that's it.
Yes.
It's a little Votes for Women doll, look, with her little marching poster.
Fabulous.
And I thought that was just brilliant. So thank you, Santa, for that and for knowing me so well. That's amazing.
Where do we get one of those?
Yeah, isn't it fantastic? I'm really pleased with that. So I, like Emma, I can't pretend to know what it's like to be a BAME woman candidate or councillor. But what I think is really important is reaching out to our community. Obviously, my dream is that we will get lots of women from different Black and minority ethnic communities joining our council, and then they will be able to make the links into their community. We're not there yet, so we all have, those of us who are on the council already have a huge job to do and a huge role to play. And I think there are a number of things we can do there. And I think the first thing I would say is that, of course, there are different Black and minority ethnic communities that have different issues and barriers to coming forward for civic life. And I think it's important not to assume that, you know, what's been a barrier for one group will necessarily be a barrier for another group. There'll be different different issues coming out. And I think understanding what those barriers are and listening, as Emma said, to people like Shabina, who can speak so in such an articulate way about what might be the issues that they're facing, and then working out together what you can do to support people to come forward more, and helping to recruit male allies. And this, it's not always easy, this. Sometimes we have to challenge people, and we have to challenge them in perhaps even in a culture we're not very familiar with, and say, you know, why are you not supporting this candidate or this group of people to come forward? And that won't always be very easy, and it won't always be very straightforward. But I always think the best way of finding out what's getting in the way is to ask someone, what are the barriers and how can I help you to overcome them? Listening and supporting them. standing up in the Labour Party, in Labour Party meetings, if we feel there is sexist or a behaviour that is anything other than what we would, but the inclusive environment we would all want to see, we have to stand up and say so. And I think that encouragement to take the next step, whatever the next step is, whether it's to stand for one of the party offices, whether it's to go and be a school governor, whatever people feel is that some people will want to come straight in and be a councillor. That's great. I always love it when that happens. But helping people to take that next step and putting them in touch with the training, the fantastic training Emma does, and there is other training that the LGA does, putting people in touch with that so we can help and support them. And I always think of one of my councillors. She's not a BAME councillor, but I think her story is relevant. We have a lot of discussion in the party about how valuable street stalls are. We're always talking about it. I don't know if this happens in every constituency. It certainly does in mine. Oh, street stalls are a waste of time. Why do we do them? But I've got a councillor at Stevenage who said the fact that we were there week after week in the town centre, and she would come up and talk to us, and that's what actually made her become a councillor. She came up and spoke to us. She realised, we weren't really very different to her. She's actually a teacher, but she always thought that it wasn't going to be for her. And then when she came and talked to us, she got to know us all, and she then put herself forward for council. So being in those groups, and I reaching out to the groups of BAME women that we know, and going and being with them and talking to them is really important. And my last thing is I'm a great fan of poetry. It's my weakness in life. I love poetry, and I love children's poetry particularly. I always think I'm going to do, there's a lovely masters they do at Goldsmiths College in children's literature, and I will do it one of these days when I get a day off. But I love Michael Rosen's poetry, and particularly Bear Hunt, and I think that little thing in Bear Hunt, I can't go over it, I can't go under it, I'm going to have to go through it. Sometimes we have to go through things and it's hard, and we have to work out how to get through it, because there's no way over it and there's no way under it. And I think this is one of those things that's a bit like that in local government. You can't go over it, you can't go under it, you've got to go through it to get to where you want to go. And I would encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah. I think something I do want to say is those fantastic street stalls that I've been on many, many times at all points in the year. That was one of my first interactions with the Labour Party on any sort of local level. I remember being much younger and going up to one of those stalls. Yeah, so they do work. I'm here.
Great, that's fantastic.
And we've got a question in the chat. The question's from Nikki, and it says, how do we ensure that some of the barriers to women standing in local politics, such as lengthy meetings or daytime meetings, which may disadvantage working women or those with caring responsibilities, are removed? So I'm going to go to...
Get to be leader of the council, and then you decide when the meetings are. That's the...
Okay, I'll go to you first then, Sharon.
No, I really think I did speak about, the idea of more virtual meetings now. As I say, it's a mixed blessing, because they can be tiring and time consuming. But honestly, the fact that anybody can participate from their living room now, and I think for many of us, if you'd asked me last November to do a meeting on Zoom, I'd never heard of Zoom. I wouldn't have known what you were talking about. Now I do it all day, every day. And I think that ability to participate virtually in meetings is really important. The timing of meetings is important. And I think the thing is, we can, if we push too hard, sometimes it makes people dig their heels in. I think what we need to do is say, all right, if the chair of the meeting, for example, maybe a man, maybe retired, that wouldn't be unusual in local government, and may be quite happy to come in and get out from the house and come and sit in a meeting in the town hall in the middle of the day. But I think it's fair to say, well, yeah, okay, if you want to have some of the meetings during the day, but can we have some of them in the evening so that I can participate? So could we alternate it between an evening meeting and a daytime meeting, for example? I think that's fair. You know, if you try and push it too hard and say I want all our meetings to be after 7 o'clock, that might be a push too far. Also, different councils have different styles of meeting. The county council that I'm a member of always meets during the day. There are no evening meetings. The district council always meets in the evening. So if you can only attend evening meetings, then you know, maybe I know we don't have district councils everywhere, I understand that, but you know, have a look at when their meetings generally are. But virtual meetings, I think, is a real plus, because if you have got caring responsibilities and you can't leave the house always, you can participate anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Shabina next.
So one of the things that I have not divulged here is I'm actually the mother of 4 children aged between 15 and 9, who's my youngest. And I think that the virtual meetings have brought about a blessing, because I'm also disability officer for our CLP. So we would have CLP meetings, branch meetings, Labour group meetings, which often take place as well. We've got business and policy meetings, agenda book meetings under the Labour group too. And we would also have the various scrutiny meetings if you sit on a scrutiny meeting, and then you've got your council meetings too. So there was a lot to juggle before COVID took hold. And I completely agree with Sharon. I think that the blessing that's taken place with having meetings virtually, although it can't compensate for face-to-face, I really do like the face-to-face interaction, standing up in the chamber and being able to put your point forward. But I think that having a virtual meeting has enabled me, or given me the advantage that keep an eye on the children's homework, for example, or make sure that I'm not rushing to give them tea and then rushing to get out to get to council meetings. And I've got very cooperative and very, very supportive other half as well. So the only other thing I think that I'd like to suggest is that we had a fantastic women's officer in our CLP last year, Carol Johnson, I'd like to take her name, who was very supportive of the fact that when we had all members CLP meetings, she was insistent on the fact that childcare be provided so that women could come and vote who had caring responsibilities. And indeed, during her tenure, there was childcare whenever CLP meetings took place, and women would be able to come and leave their children at the in the facility that was there for childcare, and they would be able to vote. And that encourages women actually to come forward as well and participate and to have a voice and to have their say. In the council locally, in the district council, we don't have such provision for women, but like Sharon says, most of the meetings do take place in the evening time, and the Cambridge County Council one take place during the day as well. I work as a GP, so I work part-time, and the reason why I do that is that, number one, I think it's really important to have a balance about everything. So I work 3 days and I've got 2 days off. I work one morning as well, so it's basically 2.5 days, and that facilitates me to be able to attend meetings. And one part of the week my husband does the school run, the other part of the week I do the school run, so I'm able to still get home in time and to take care of the kids and to attend the meeting. So virtually for the moment it's great, it works out, and it keeps me more grounded and more sane. So I'm not juggling, it doesn't feel as if I'm juggling as many balls as I used to. So yeah, some of these are the suggestions that I think could be put forward to make life a lot more easier. A nice mix of virtual meetings hand in hand with face-to-face, or even given the choice actually, might be good to help women.
Can I just make another point about the virtual meetings, Tina? And that is that I think it's been a great leveller, because in the past, you know, you would men would come to a meeting and they would be there, and they're completely you know, they're away from children and family and pets and all the rest of it. And now we're all in the same situation. We're having meetings in our home, so our children pop up in our backgrounds and our pets pop up, and the cat walks across the table when you're in the middle. And men seem to find this so disconcerting. I found it really interesting because it's part of life to me. And I always remember a story that Yvette Cooper used to tell. I was moaning about having to do early morning radio interviews. I had my for reasons I won't go into, my grandson lived with me for quite a long time between He was about 18 months old until he was about 6 or 7. And I'd have to do these early morning radio interviews when he was just waking up. And I'd always have to bribe him not to talk to me in the middle of the radio interview. And Yvette Cooper told me this lovely story about when she was doing the Today programme, and she had an 8-year-old who was having a bit of a paddy, and she had to literally put her foot on the door for the bedroom where the 8-year-old was, so that she could carry out the radio interview in peace, with the 8-year-old going mad on the other side. Now, I don't advocate that, of course, but it's the sort of thing that happens. And I think we've all seen a lot more of what's going on in each other's backgrounds, and I think that's really good. And, you know, that first news film where the man was doing the news report and his kids came in, and the wife comes in and tries to take them out and the kids don't want to go, you know, that's just, it's lovely to see that sort of thing, and it's been a great leveller.
Yeah. Emma?
Just to add that, I think Shabina's right about the balance. It's been easier to balance work and being a councillor without having to travel. You know, you can jump from one to another, and that's been great. And I know for some colleagues in more rural parts of the country, you know, they often have to travel an hour to get to County Hall for a meeting, and that's crazy. You know, it really has helped with that balance. And there is definitely a movement to not go back to how things used to be before. Everybody is now got using the technology, they've all had the support, we can do it. And it's something we should look to do more of in terms of those virtual meetings, virtual engagements going forward. Just in terms of, I guess, the general culture, I think this is why it goes back to encouraging more women to stand and more diverse candidates to stand, because once you have those experiences within the room talking about how this works for them, you'll start to see the changes. So in my own council in Rotherham, when I joined, all the meetings were during the day, and they were all in the town hall. We're now at a 50-50 Labour group, so we're equal in terms of men and women. And we've introduced the model policy by the LGA as well. We've gone a bit further actually in terms of childcare, councillors with disabilities, in terms of how maternity cover and paternity cover as well, and brought that in as a formal policy at the council to support councillors to be able to do their work. And I think as more people from different backgrounds come in, you'll find there isn't a right way of doing it. So actually some people prefer them during the day because the kids are at school, other people prefer them in the evening because they work, shift work. People have all sorts of sort of circumstances that you have to take on board. So actually at the moment we've got a mix. Our meetings, particularly our sort of Labour group meetings, are half and half, day and evening, and also some of our committee meetings at different times as well. So there's an opportunity for everybody to take part because we have things happening at various times during the day. And that's come about because we have those people within the council. I think it brings about that change and brings about that discussion.
Oh, okay, we've got a few more questions. The next question we have is on the role of CLP representatives in encouraging young people, particularly women, to stand. So what can CLP representatives do, or do you have any stories of how members of your CLP executive encouraged you to stand? And we're going to Emma first.
Yes, and this goes back to asking her to stand. I became active within the Labour Party and was put forward to stand because there were some amazing women within my branch who, you know, thought I had that potential and encouraged me and supported me to do it. And I think that's the most important thing we can do. A lot of that is done informally by building up those networks, by talking to that the young woman who turns up to her first branch meeting, making sure you call her afterwards and tell her it isn't that bad, don't worry, nobody understands their first Labour Party meeting, and have that conversation and give that encouragement as well. I think the women's officers within CLPs are really important. I know ours is does a really good job, and we've got a programme of support actually for women candidates in Rotherham for next year as well. A number of speakers from all over the country are coming to talk to us on Zoom and give us that support and that network as well, which is really important. So we can talk about what's happening, or somebody said this, how do I respond, and that kind of thing. So that's been a new development by our women's officer, and it's been really brilliant. It's been nice to have that. And again, using Zoom means we can hear from women all over the country. You don't have to travel, and people can dip in. It just makes things a lot easier. I know some places aren't that fortunate. If your branch or CLP is moribund, then use those national networks. I think they can provide some of that as well to you.
I think what you've said about how Zoom can connect women is really important, because certainly while I was completing my A-levels and standing for district council, I didn't really know anyone who was in the same position as me, and it wasn't until I went to that co-op party summer school that I actually met someone who'd done the same thing the year before, and I actually managed to win their seat. So I think that the networks we built, particularly as women, are really important, because those chats that I'm sure we'll have, which are sort of women only, are really just helpful and inspirational. And sometimes it's just nice to see something that maybe isn't politics, or something funny that happened. And yeah, the young Fabians have a women's chat as well. So if you want to be added to that, that's something that I can sort out as well. And we're going to Sharon next.
Thank you, Tina. I think I was just, when Emma was talking about CLP meetings and your first experience, my first ever CLP meeting, no, it was a branch meeting actually, but it sticks in my mind because I must have gone just before Labour Party conference, and the whole meeting, there was I didn't know at the time, but a very fractious group in that branch who were working on composited motions to go to conference, and it was all about getting your line in or somebody else's line in. And I thought, I'm never coming back to this meeting. It's awful, because they were all arguing with each other and there was shouting going on and people walking out the room, and it was just horrible. And luckily I'd gone along with a neighbour of mine who'd been a member for quite a long time, and she did exactly what Emma said. She said to me, "Oh, it's not always like that, don't worry." So I think when I said about bring a sister, sometimes people will just walk into a branch meeting, people you don't know. So if that happens, make the effort to go and speak to them, talk to them after the meeting. If it's a virtual meeting, there's always that little bit at the beginning when someone comes in and you don't recognise them. Have a chat with them, talk to them, find out why they've come along this time. And I don't mean interrogate them, but just be friendly with them. I think that's always good. When we're back to actually meeting each other in person, that little bit of time after the meeting, when you go along and just welcome somebody and say and speak to them, and ask them how they felt about the meeting or whatever, is really important. But if you get the opportunity to actually go along with somebody who's thinking about getting more involved, I think it can be really helpful to have that person alongside you. And whether you're taking them to the Women's Forum, our Women's Forum is just fantastic, and we have amazing discussions. We meet every month. Lots and lots of our women councillors have come to us through that route, and it's been a really positive experience for all of us. And we have an International Women's Day, sorry about the dog, we have an International Women's Day event every year, which is a big thing for us. and we celebrate that. We've also set up a local branch of the Fawcett Society. So again, that's somewhere where we network and meet with women. We do have brothers who come along as well, who are brothers who are honorary sisters, because they like it so much that they come and join us, which is great. And I think that experience in the Labour Party of that there are people in the Labour Party. I love my party and I love most of the people in it, nearly all of them. But there are people in the party who are procedure freaks, and that's really off-putting if you've never been to a meeting before, when you get people, you know, point of order, Mr. Chairman, and all that stuff. It can be really off-putting to people. So having someone to sit alongside you through your first few meetings, I think is really helpful. And I think conference, now I especially love the co-op conference. I don't know how you feel, Emma and Tina, but I love the co-op conference. It's really great. It's great for getting to know people. And it's not as enormous and scary as the Labour Party conference, and some absolutely incredible speakers. So, you know, if you can go along, we always used to, when we had Labour Party conferences that we went along to, hopefully we will again this year, but who knows, when you can do that, we always organise a minibus to go along to the women's conference, and we all go together. So doing things like that, so you get that, you know, that sisterhood and that friendship, and you bring people into that and you encourage them to get involved and join in.
Yeah, I think the co-op conference is fantastic, and what you've said about the women's conference and going together sounds really lovely as well. It's interesting what you were saying about procedure, because my first CLP meeting, I couldn't remember it any more clearly, actually, because my first CLP meeting, we were talking about the standing orders, and it was a really long meeting. It went back and forth between the two sides, and it was, you know, it's something that in our CLP had been going on for quite some time, just trying to work out, you know, which one we actually wanted. And as for meetings in the first place, when I joined the Labour Party, you know, I was campaigning, and that's what I was doing. That's what I was interested in, alongside all of the stuff I do outside of the Labour Party. And I didn't think I'd end up at a meeting, let alone be chairing this event tonight. So I think there's a lot to be said for just keeping at it with those meetings. And I can definitely vouch for the Stevenage Women's Forum. It's fantastic. I would recommend anyone in the Eastern region who is interested in setting one up goes and checks that one out. Yeah, we're going to Shabina next.
Thank you, Tina. Well, I must say that the Stevenage Women Forum certainly seems like something that we can bring back here to Peterborough. We've got an active CLP, actually, and the women's officers that we have had have promoted events on International Women's Day, just as Sharon was talking about, and we've always wanted to invite notable women within the Labour Party to come and speak at those events when COVID wasn't upon us as well. And we often used to get together from a CLP perspective once every quarter, and we've got a famous cathedral here in Peterborough, so they've got a lovely little tea room, and we'd all get together and invite the women members of the Labour Party so they feel more included. We also have had women events in which we've had prominent female councillors such as Jocelyn Scott in Cambridge, who's wonderful and would sort of really emanate powerful accounts of her experience and how it would be encouraging for women to have a look at her viewpoint and how she's been through it all. And she's a friend of my social media page as well, and I gain a lot of inspiration from her. And it was actually at that event that we had, that was organised by our women's officer last year, in fact, that we had two women that came, were very quiet, sat in the corner, and just as Sharon had said, you go up to them and you have a talk, introduce yourself. And I'm delighted to say that one of them wants to stand in next year's local council elections. Her name's Noreen, so she's certainly become involved and helped campaign as well. And the other thing that we did in last year's, because we had a by-election here in Peterborough as well. But the other thing that we did was in local council elections are that we would have all women canvassing sessions. And it was a really fun way of just getting together, and we'd have our own little social media group, and somebody would announce there, well, come on girlies, let's show the men how it's done. And we'd get out there and knock on the doors, and it would be a great way of coming together. And we do that from a sort of a region basis. So we team up with our Cambridgeshire sisters and ask them to come along as well. And as Sharon and Emma have said, that if you don't have a very active CLP, look at your regional women's forum. So we've also got a Labour Women's East Officers Facebook page as well. And there's a lot of active members on there, and it's very supportive. And I can remember in last year's local council elections, there were candidates who had come across some pretty horrible times when they were out canvassing, people throwing leaflets back at them, etc., on their faces, and they'd share it. And actually, it was a place of coming together and giving each other a bit of a boost, morale boost, and a bit of a reassurance that, look, you know, we're all in this together and keep going, and it's wonderful. So all of those things were really, I think, beneficial, as is the normal procedural rules with regards to nominating women. So in our CLP, you know, we do have that breakdown that so much of the executive, there has to be a proportion of women on it, and we have to. And it did happen in last year's CLP that we didn't have as many women, and we went back to the drawing board, and they made sure that those amount of women were fulfilled. So it is, it's exciting to see that we can have those things put in place and to keep to them as well and gain new ideas. But this is wonderful, what I've been hearing from Emma and from Sharon, and certainly it seems as if the Stevenage Women's Forum is another addition to what we're already doing. So yeah.
Thank you for that. We've had a question on the Q&A function from Cecilia, and she asks, what particular policies do you think we should push for as elected women? Let's start with Emma.
And my answer would be what you're passionate about. There are sort of lots of national causes, there are lots of ideas out there. In fact, the Co-op Party, we've just published our 12 ideas for local manifestos around key issues and how you might want to address those for the elections next year. But I particularly say as a new councillor, something you are passionate about would be the thing to push. And that could be anything from an issue in your ward to something you have experience of. And I think that enthusiasm and that passion for the issue, and having to do all the things you have to do to change the policy within the council, all the research, the talking to people, persuading people, looking at what the solutions are, you're going to need that determination. And I think if it's something you really care about, that's really important. And I think that's where people's experiences are really good in informing councils and bringing about the best policies as well. So it kind of got me thinking that question about, you know, what am I most proud of? What have I brought through the council over the last few years? I brought a motion around healthy relationship education. That's before it was mandatory nationally, in support of that, and ensuring that children had access to that age appropriate relationship education. I also brought a motion around 100 years of women getting the vote, which was last year, and that included a whole raft of things, from bringing in that policy to support candidates and councillors from more diverse backgrounds, to getting a picture of our first female councillor in the foyer of the town hall, because it frustrated me every time I walked in. There was a sea of white male faces of previous mayors, and that's what welcomed you. And we've now got a lovely plaque and a picture to her as well. She was a real trailblazer, was involved in the suffragette movement. Yeah, we've now got her recognised in the town hall, and it's those kind of things that I think your passion will shine through, and you will get those through. So yeah, sorry, I'm not going to give you a list of things you should do. I think you need to look at your ward, the issues you care about, and take it from there.
Yeah, that's something that I definitely agree with, and I think that what you've said about having the first female councillor up in the town hall is really, really important, because I think quite often for women, certainly young women, going into these places kind of for the first time, and that's what you're greeted with, it falls into that whole rest of the unwelcoming atmosphere, because if you're being told, you know, one thing by the people in your life, and like potentially in the Labour Party, and then to also see that, it really reinforces that local government isn't for women, and it's for all of us. And I think that's really, really important. Let's go to Shabina next.
Thank you, Tina. I think that Emma very pertinently has stressed on the fact that what our local areas are representative of. And just before the discussion started, I made you aware that we've got very strategic elections over here next year in Peterborough, where we hope to take minority control of the council. So in order to aid that, we've had to produce a robust manifesto, which is in the process of being finalised, and it's got some really promising things to it. But the things that are lacking locally over here are obviously housing. With regards to crime, we've got increasing crime rates because of the cuts to policing that we know are nationwide. So those are some of the generalised things. The other things that I'm particularly interested in are the disproportionate effect that COVID obviously coming up, and it's been the first time that this has happened in a generation that we've faced a crisis of this magnitude, and the disproportionate effect that it's had on BAME communities in particular. We've got a very large BAME community here within Peterborough, about 27 South Asian origin residents live within Peterborough, and a large proportion of them have suffered as a result of COVID-19. And I think there was a lot that was lacking in the government's report when they stressed on the impact that BAME communities were faced with when it came to COVID-19. So I think that it's really important, in the view of the diversity that we've got here in the city, the disproportionate impact that such events can have on these populations, and how poverty affects them, and how health inequalities are also addressed as well, due to language barriers and other barriers as well. So that's one of the policies that I'd like to see hopefully come to fruition if we do take minority control, and to address this at the very least. The other thing is investment and growth within these pocketed areas where there are diverse populations within the city of Peterborough. There's already some programmes that have taken place, and the council has secured a £22 million Towns Fund bid from the government, but it's all about, I think, adequate public consultation. And we've got a Tory-run council at the moment, and there are questions around where funding has gone in the past and why it hasn't been implemented where it was promised. And part of that is a lack of consultation with the public. So adequate public consultation moving forward, I think, is something that we could certainly improve on if we took minority control over the council. And looking at the socio-economically deprived areas and gaining the view of those people and residents that these decisions impact ultimately. And also that the people that are making those decisions, how is their makeup, or the boards that make these decisions up, how representative are they of these diverse communities? So we see boards that are predominantly people that are in big executive roles, but they don't know anything about the diversity of the people within these diverse constituencies or communities. So that's something that I've raised with officers in previous meetings as well, led by our Labour group leader. When we want to foster a sense of social justice, I think that we've got to start from those parameters as well. I passed a motion last year on bullying in schools. I saw a real increase in the number of teenage girls that were coming to me and were self-harming or feeling suicidal as a result of bullying in schools. And I think that COVID-19 has brought about the stark realities and the impact that it can have on young people's mental health. It's been a really difficult year for our young people, the way they've been graded, the way they haven't had adequate or proper education. It's been phenomenally difficult for teachers and schools alike to undergo masses of risk assessment, and it's had an impact all round on our young people. And we can just see the impact that the university students have had as well. So I brought out a motion in bullying of schools, and I think that there needs to be a consistent policy all across the board for those local education authority schools. And I've suggested case studies being brought up and case packs being brought up, whereby a case report is generated when bullying is identified, how are we supporting that child within the school and what we can do about it, and how we're keeping the family on board and well informed too, and also conflict resolution as part of those policies. We have just about put in the motion one of my fellow councillors, Ikra Yasin. She's the youngest councillor, female. She's only 22 years old and she was elected last year. And I am ever so proud of the domestic abuse policy that she has passed and has insisted that Peterborough City Council adopts as well. So it's really important from a safeguarding perspective, and as Sharon referred to, that domestic violence and abuse has increased by about 80 to 90% in view of COVID. So it was a need of the time for a very long time, but because it's just become apparent, it's woken us up to the stark realities that domestic abuse could be facing. So improving on that aspect as well, and again, reaching out to ethnic minority communities where domestic violence isn't very much spoken about. That's one of the policies as well. And also, as we all know, that the cuts to youth services has been monumental here locally in Peterborough. So it's about fostering opportunities and creating opportunities for youth here within the city of Peterborough, which I fundamentally believe ties in with the increasing crime rate that we're seeing here within the city as well. So it's about fostering those opportunities and how we could explore that. But that's just a little about what my thought processes are at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you for that. That was really interesting. I think particularly what you said about opportunity, in terms of communicating with different communities, I think there's a lot that we can all take from that. So in my hometown in Letchworth, we have a higher than national average population that speak Punjabi, as do I, and that's been something that's been a useful tool on the doorstep, particularly when communicating with women of all ages. In terms of, again, in terms of education and young people's place in the community, that's been so severely hit. I was one of the people whose A-level results was impacted. There was a long wait to then see what universities were going to do, and then they were changed back. And, you know, there was a lack of support for schools during that whole time as well. And as for university, I'm a first year at Queen Mary, and so far I haven't actually been in. I'm planning on commuting when we can, but I've just I finished my first semester and the whole thing's been online, which obviously has implications in terms of not being able to interact with other people, and it's really different to what I expected. And I think that especially when you expect something to be a certain way your whole life and then it's not, that really does and has had quite a big impact on young people. And lastly, we're coming to Sharon.
I think these have been an incredibly difficult few months for our young people, and you know, I really feel for them, whether you're, you know, university student age, secondary school age, or even the younger ones. I think it's been incredibly tough on them, and you know, I think we all need to do everything we can to help support support them. And I agree with Shabina about youth services. It's pitiful in Hertfordshire. The Tories have all but, you know, cut all the funding for it, which is terrible. I think I wanted to answer the question in two parts, really. The first one is the experience and knowledge and wisdom that that women bring to the council has many different strands to it. And I think what Emma said about things that people are passionate about really shines out in my council. And it might not necessarily be related to the job they do on the council, but you know, making sure you know what areas of expertise people have is really important. I've got one councillor with a very severely learning disabled son. She is absolutely brilliant in championing the rights of people with learning disabilities. I've got one who's disabled, who every time, she's a very senior councillor, she's my deputy leader. Every time we're talking about planning matters, environment matters, she will always keep us on track by saying, yeah, but what are we going to do with that for disabled people? That's really great, I think. I've got a couple of councillors who are passionate about finance. They work in finance, and they, you know, the idea that if you keep the finances on track, it makes everything else work in the council. That's really important to me as well. But, you know, I've got a couple that do that and are really care about it. I've got one councillor who runs a children's contact centre, so she's got a wealth of knowledge around children's safeguarding and issues like that. I've got one who's a mental health social worker, and she's got a wealth of knowledge on that. Our BAME councillor has great networks within our Black and minority ethnic communities, and she has really championed the Black Lives Matter cause through our council. I've got a couple of councillors who work in the health service and have loads and loads of knowledge about how the health service works, which I don't have any, so that's really helpful. And I've got a councillor who runs our local food bank, and she brings a whole load of experience about what she's hearing literally day after day from the users of the food bank about, and the causes of the people using food bank move and change all the time. At the moment, it's COVID and unemployment and homelessness because of unemployment. But we've been through various phases of it where it was, you know, the waiting period for universal credit, issues around PIP payments, you know, personal independence payments, assessments. So it moves and changes all the time, and she brings all that knowledge to the council. And I've got people who are teachers. So I think bringing all that knowledge together, that is the benefit of a council. You're bringing all that experience from a huge range. But there are some real issues where I think we need to drive forward. We know there's a huge wealth inequality and economic inequality gap that, as Shabina said, has been made far worse by COVID. And I think the community wealth building approach that many of our cooperative councils are taking, where we are responsible in councils for spending huge sums of money, and we need to make sure that when we do that, we are using that money wisely to create skills and job opportunities for local people, to make sure that, you know, we are equitable in the way that money is distributed, that we are making sure that it's spent fairly, and that it supports that creation of wealth for our community and the development of skills for our local community that's so important. So whether I'm talking about our £1 billion town centre regeneration spend, or whether we're letting a contract for our housing, we've got to make sure we do that in a way that supports the economy locally and supports the tackling of some of the inequalities in our economy. The second one I'd go for is a much greater devolution of powers and funding from central government to local government, because I think that really makes a difference, and it particularly makes a difference to women. Where decisions are made locally, and oh boy, have we seen that during the COVID crisis. You know, when the government tried to organise sending out doorstep food parcels to 80 and 90-year-olds from major contract caterers who supply Westminster, or probably their mates in Westminster if truth were told, and you were ending up with a 90-year-old getting a 5-kilogram bag of pasta dropped on her doorstep, which was utterly useless to her and would take her a month of Sundays to use up. That's when we see how things can best be achieved at local level. We've seen it with housing rough sleepers, getting them all in. We've seen it with distributing business grants. The government could not have done what we did, because we know our businesses, they were all shut down, so you couldn't get in touch with them at their business address. You had to know where they were and who they were, and local councils have done that. And certainly in the whole placemaking, climate change agenda, all of that, the only way we're going to do that is from the local level upwards. You won't do it from central government. So I think that's really important, that real devolution down to local level. We still haven't got a green paper on adult social care, which is absolutely ridiculous. You know, we limp along with a system that's broken and doesn't work. We've got care providers going bust all the time, and you know, people still trying to wring a profit out of what should be, in my humble opinion, a public service, and we've got to sort that out. I've already spoken about our domestic abuse service, but just another aspect of it that we've worked on. We know that living in a household where domestic abuse is prevalent can damage a fetus. It's to do with the chemicals that are in the fetal brain. And we've done a magnificent project with the Stefano Foundation, where we take a young couple where either one or both of them have been in families where domestic abuse is prevalent. And we work with them from the early stages of the pregnancy until the child is 5 years old, and support them to, you know, with courses on anger management, on relationships and all those sorts of things. We've worked with about 30 families in Stevenage. They have a one-to-one caseworker, and that project has all been monitored by the University of London. So we won't know the final outcomes of that for a couple of years yet, because the project's still underway. But you know, those kind of projects we need to keep funding. And the ones that I'm particularly proud of recently, and Emma's been instrumental in this, is the modern slavery, moving the modern slavery motion at council, and tackling the fair trade issues, you know, making sure that our councils operate in a way that supports fair trade. So the Councils Network produces case study booklets from our councils across the country, and we publish that 3 times a year. And we've just published our COVID action case study booklet, which has got loads and loads of examples in. So if anybody wants to see those, they're on the Councils Innovation Network website, but there are fantastic examples from so many councils about things that we can get active on and get delivering.
That sounds really, really good, and it's something I'll be definitely looking into after this. I'll see if I can send out the link in the follow-up email to this event as well. Oh, look at the time. I think we should close up. So if everyone wants to say just a closing remark on why women should stand. Let's go to Shabina first.
Well, women have a place. They always have since the beginning of time. And we don't need to assert on the fact that women are being done a favour by being invited onto platforms such as politics. We have a belonging here, and we have a right to be here. And for any woman that is aspiring or interested in her community, wants to bring about change, or just has an interest in finding out a little bit more how to engage with their local community, and if she wants to have a chat about it, especially if you're a young woman who aspires to look at this area, then don't hesitate to get in touch with your local female councillors as well, or the Labour Party representatives, or your CLP or women's officer, and I'm sure that there'll be reams of advice for you to come on board. But we need more women, and like I say, it isn't just one woman that makes the change, and she's not in it for herself. We are a tribe. We're a tribe of sisters here to support each other and be allies of each other, the countrywide. And I think that in the Labour Party, we can pride ourselves on the fact that we are a tribe of sisters who want to bring out the best in each other and to complement each other, and to make sure that we take our movement forward with each other, shoulder to shoulder. So definitely come on board. There's no reason why you shouldn't have a place here, and we are here to support you.
Thank you. And we're going to Emma next.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you very much for putting on this event tonight. It's been inspirational to hear everybody, and it's events like this that give you the motivation to keep going. We've maybe touched on some of the downsides of being a councillor, but there are many, many upsides as well, and it's your opportunity to change things and change things for the better. I think my advice is you can do it. You may not know it yet, but you can do it. Next year, you know, there are over 4,000 council seats up for election across the country. Now is your chance, and I would encourage you to do that and seek out those networks, seek out those women councillors, seek out women comrades as well, and start thinking about it and talking about it, because you can do it, and we'd encourage you to do so.
Okay, and Sharon.
I'm sure all of us have had those conversations on the doorstep with women where you know, you ask them about voting and they say, oh, I'm not interested in politics, I don't know anything about it, I don't understand it. And you'll see some children, you say, oh, have you got children? Yes. And are they at school? Yeah, they're at school. And you know, that's what politics is about. I'll always say to them, you know, making sure that our kids get a good education, making sure that if you're caring for a relative that you can get the care you need. You may be thinking of starting a business. Are the conditions right to help you start that business? Is the support there? You know, this is what politics, especially at local level, this is what politics is about. It's about changing things. And, you know, being a councillor has changed my life, and very, very much for the better. And, you know, it's when you're a councillor, it's the one-to-one things that really stick in your mind. When you get a letter from somebody who you've helped with their housing and you've made a difference, if it's one of our domestic abuse victims that you've helped to get away from their abuser, even things like providing, I was helping one of our businesses to get their business grant the other day, and he'd been in, you know, he was worried about his business going under, and when we helped him get a business grant, he knew that he was going to be okay, at least for a short period of time. So you know, you can change things in the big picture thing of, you know, transforming a town centre, or, you know, doing something with the climate change, but you can also make a real difference to people's lives. So that's what politics is for me. It's not about the yaboo stuff that goes on in the House of Commons, or the echo chamber on Twitter where people are being rude and disrespectful to each other. It's about the little things that make such a difference to everybody's life, making sure there's a nice park nearby to people, making sure they've got a roof over their head. All those things are so important. So I think we all need to ask ourselves, if not me, who's going to do it? So, and if not now, when? Because now is the time, and you are the person.
I think that's a fantastic quote. Thank you. Before we close, I want to mention an opportunity that's come through from the Economy and Finance Network concerning a pamphlet they're planning to do on the Labour heartland. And the three main questions they're looking to address are: why Labour lost in 2019, what Labour can achieve in opposition to rebuild the heartland, and a couple of things on general election policies that we can propose. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity for women to get involved. Lots of us have experience of being in opposition, and lots of us are also in administrations where we're leading. So I think that's a great opportunity for women in our regional group to get involved. I want to end by saying that there's a couple of things, and one of them is to mention 50-50 Parliament as something that's really helped me get involved in politics. They're looking to achieve 2020 women standing by the end of 2020. So I would really encourage people to sign up to stand and if you've signed up to stand already, or if you can think of a female colleague or friend who would be really, really good, ask her to stand too. I want to say that the co-op party and the Young Fabians are the most welcoming places that I've found within the Labour Party throughout my time as a member. So I'd really encourage people to get involved with both of those if you aren't already. And lastly, I just want to say a thank you to the Young Fabians Women's Officer, Nikki, for introducing herself and her plans for the next year, and to our fantastic panel for being here today. Thank you.
And a huge thank you to you, Tina, for excellent organisation of the evening. And I've been really inspired listening to Emma and Shabina, and to you, and you always inspire me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. It was lovely meeting you all, and no doubt we will definitely be in touch and meet again. And thanks for the inspiration as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Tina, and good luck for next year in the elections. Let us know what we can do to help.